Okay, it says it is now the meeting is recording, so I gotta let everyone know by MS Teams policy that it's being recorded. All right. Well, welcome to a cold February morning, I guess. I'm Ryan Forbes. I'm the Area Resource Conservationist out of the Brookings Field Support Office. And we have a group of Conservation District partners on with us this morning, and we're gonna kind of walk through the designs and how to put all the NRCS technical mumbo jumbo together and try to design a tree plan for a field windbreak and a farmstead windbreak. So with that, what I'm going to do is share my screen here. And once again, someone let me know if you can see the PowerPoint in front of me. Tanya, can you see that?
Yeah, it's up.
What? That's a yes or no?
Yep.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. All right, so this is the windbreak training. Like I said, there's my name and where I'm at and my phone number. Throughout this training, if you guys have any questions, just let me know and we'll just get into this. So kind of what we're going to cover today is, once again, try to put all this information together. So we're going to start in the Field Office Tech Guide. We're going to talk about the actual 380 standard. We're going to talk about what is required of the 380 standard. We're going to visit about web soil survey. We're going to hit some high points in the Woodland Tech Note 42. We're going to discuss and kind of work through these two examples, the field windbreak and farmstead windbreak, using the South Dakota CPA 6 or the tree form. And then at the very end, we're gonna talk about job approval authority and what that means for partners. Our state office is currently updating our job approval authority for the ecological sciences, and that will allow partners to be able to get job approval authority for things like trees, shelter belt renovations, the mulching standard, grass seedings, and those type of things. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit too. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Field Office Tech Guide. So I'm going to escape out of my PowerPoint here now. And I have a link to this, but the easiest way I would suggest would be to get to our Field Office Tech Guide or web soil survey that we'll talk about here in a little bit. Just be a simple Google and you should be able to get to it. So with the Field Office Tech Guide, this is where all our standards are at. All standard specifications, tech notes, everything about the soils is in this. So when you come in here, you just have to select your state. And we're in South Dakota. And it's broken into 5 different sections, okay? And most of the time when you're dealing with trees or grass seedings, the 2 places that you're going to live inside this tech guide are going to be in section 1. And there's all tech notes in here. And then you'll notice there's a woodland tech note and a range. So in the range tech note, there's a bunch of tech notes in here about basically grass seedings or grass covers. And the one where if you're doing a grass seeding, how to get that grass established that you'll really want to take note to is the perennial vegetation or the range tech note 4. But today we're going to be talking about woodland stuff when it comes to trees. So we're going to be mostly dealing with the Woodland Tech Note 42. And if we have some time, we might kind of get into this Woodland Tech Note 38, which is basically speaks to how to handle trees and shrubs and then like tree fabric and that type of thing. So there is that. So that's in section 1. The other section that most people hang out in this thing is the actual section 4. And this is where the conservation practices are. And they're listed alphabetically. And the one that we're going to talk to today is the windbreak establishment. Okay. So when you click on this, there'll be a couple different things in here. There'll actually be, they just rename these naming conventions, and I'm still trying to process if they make sense or not. But so you just might have to kind of click on them to see what they really are. But here is the actual conservation practice standard, and we're going to open that up in a little bit. Here's a statement of work. So every single one of NRCS conservation practices has a statement of work. For typical conservation practices, we don't deal much with that. If NRCS was dealing with a TSP or something like that, that's when we'd have a statement of work of what the deliverables would be. And then there's the implementation requirements for the practice as well. And the way South Dakota is set up, you always have a standard and you always have a implementation requirement or documentation requirement for the standard. Okay, so that's where that's at. So now I'm going to click on the actual standard, and I have that saved onto my computer. Tanya, give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Okay, thank you. All right. So as basic as this is, I really want to stress what these standards really are and kind of how they're laid out with NRCS. And just give you some helpful hints when you actually read a standard for NRCS, what it's talking about. So they all have kind of a similar look, I guess. They start off up top. They have the windbreak establishment, and then they give you a code, and it actually gives you the unit that the practice is actually measured in. And for windbreak shelter belts, that would be linear feet. There's always a definition with all these standards, okay? So the windbreak or shelter belt, single row, multi-purpose, shrub, or linear configures. They always have purposes. And as you can see with a windbreak establishment, there are a lot of purposes that you can use this practice for, okay? Lots of stuff. So what we'll be talking about today will be wind erosion, right? Because we're going to plant a field windbreak, and probably this one here, how we're going to manage some snow, because we're going to planning on building a house and putting up some outbuildings and that type of thing. And we want to manage it for snow in the winter on a cold morning like we have here. Conditions where the practice applies. All right. So this will tell you basically what land use that you're going to be using this on and where the actual practice applies in South Dakota to the landscape. The criteria. So all the practices have criteria. And the thing you have to remember about the criteria, it doesn't matter which one of these purposes that you're doing, you always have to meet this criteria, okay? So what this criteria speaks to is the layout of what you're gonna do. It talks about the Woodland Tech Note 38. It talks about their expected tree heights, a worksheet that we're gonna go over today. It speaks to, you know, using good soils and the species that are going to fit there, not having noxious weeds being planted, orientate to your windbreaks to troublesome wind. And so all this stuff has to be followed. Then at the very bottom, Woodland Tech Note 42 for guidance, okay? So what in South Dakota, we're very heavy on tech notes. So we do not put a whole lot into conservation practice standards. We put a lot of our actual technical information in tech notes. So always remember that. If it's referring to a tech note, you're going to find out a lot more information about that particular practice inside that tech note than what the standard will cover. So then a standard will also go through these additional criteria, and this is getting back to these purposes once again, right? So we have up here, manage snow right here. So if we come down to here, we got to do everything in the general criteria up here, but also we have to follow this right here for our manage of snow. So making sure that we have a dense enough windbreak, you know, that type of thing. All right. And there's other purposes, noise screen, visual screens, carbon storage, enhancing wildlife, efficiency, irrigation, reduce energy, and all that. So remember, figure out your purpose, your land use. You got to meet the general criteria, then plus the additional stuff to meet the actual standard practice, okay? Considerations. Well, what's a consideration? It's just like the word sounds. So a consideration is something that has been proven will help you implement this practice a little bit more successful out on the landscape. So these things are not required like the general criteria stuff. It's just a consideration, okay? So, but definitely take a look at considerations so you understand how you can improve your chances of having a more successful practice applied on the ground. Then they have a plans and specifications, which will basically be speaking about the job sheet. Then there's an operation and maintenance of the actual practice. So how is the producer, how is the participant supposed to maintain that practice? And of course, they have references in here as well. So are there any questions on the conservation practice standard and how to read one of these? No? Any questions in the chat, Tanya?
Not
Yes or
yet,
no?
but
Okay, thank you.
are you able to
Yep.
send a link to this to everyone when you send this out?
The recording?
Yeah, when you send the
Yes.
recording, can you put the link to the tech notes in there too?
Yeah, I could do something like that. Yep, not a problem. Okay. All right, so we talked about the conservation practice standard. So now we're going to jump to the actual documentation requirements, or the new name, implementation requirements. Tanya, can you see that on my screen now? Okay, thank you. So once again, you have the 380 up here. What's required? South Dakota CPA 6, that's the tree form. Windbreak establishment job sheet, planner requirements, the purpose of the planting and weed control shall be considered when planting the windbreak, indicate the location on the conservation plan map. So performance, or in other words, how are we going to check this practice out to see if it meets the standards and specs? You're going to examine the site prior to the planting. You're going to examine the plan at least annually to make sure it's established, and you're going to collect all the data that you need on the applied section on the South Dakota CPA 6. So that is the documentation requirements for this particular practice. Are there any questions on that? Okay. So let's get back to PowerPoint here. We talked about the Field Office Tech Guide, talked about the 380 practice standard, talked about the implementation requirements. So now we're going to get into the web soil survey and try to piece all this information together. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just go, this is the best way to find this is just do an engine search. From what I found. Make sure you ask questions if you have some. Okay, Tanya, can you still see my screen? I can't, your picture went away, Tanya, so you probably have to speak up.
Yeah, I can still see.
Okay, thank you. All right, so pretty simple. There's a kind of an instruction thing up here, but this web soil survey is pretty intuitive on how to do this. So it's just like some of the cars that we have anymore. It's like a push button to start thing. So you get in here. So, and you have to remember, this is the web soil survey. So all the soils have been mapped in South Dakota. So a couple different ways you can navigate. It's just really personal preference how you want to do this. You can use a section, township, or range in here. You could actually use a longitude and latitude if you had that. But I typically just use the old zoom glass up here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to zoom into eastern South Dakota. And we're going to go into Kingsbury County, northwestern Kingsbury County. Up in here. And we're going to go to some land I'm pretty familiar with because this is my dad's farm. So we're right on the north edge of Kingsbury County. You'd almost throw a stone and hit Clark County. So that's kind of where we're at in the world. And the first thing we're going to do, I went out and talked to my dad, and he wants to plant a field windbreak to protect this field right here for wind erosion. Okay, so first thing we need to do with any type of grass seeding or tree planting is what type of soil are we dealing with? Because that's really going to be the key to how we put this plan together to figure out what species will work the best in that particular site. So the first thing you do is you have an area of interest, one that you can have like a rectangle, but I typically just use this more polygon one. So we're going to click on that. And this doesn't have to be perfect, you know, for your linear feet or any of that, but we're just going to go like this. So now we created an area of interest of 6.73 acres over here. And it's got it drew out on the map like that. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is up here, we're going to hit the soils map tab. All right. So it breaks it down to the 1/10 of an acre of what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a Clarinol soil, vanilla, and Ethan. So what does that mean when it comes to trees, and how do we figure that out? So the next thing you have to do is just come over here to Soil Data Explorer. And if you wanted to, you could spend a lot of time in Web Soil Survey, and I mean a lot of time. There is everything in here from water management to waste management, military operations. If you wanted to know if this would be a good place to build a playground, road construction, just a house, a basement, any of those type of things, you could literally, on an area of interest, spend all day in here figuring out what would be the ratings for a lot of this stuff. But the thing that we're going to do here today is get into land classifications. And as you can see, we got ecological sites, we got stuff with irrigation, we got stuff with forest in here. There's all kinds of stuff in here, moisture that you can look at. But what we're going to look at today is the actual tree and shrub group. It's going to pop that down. So now we got a view description or view rating. And we're going to hit the view rating button. So what that's going to do is going to put these soils into a group. And this says a group 3 rating right here. Okay, what does that mean? Down here we have ratings, and with trees you have anywhere from a 1 to a 10. So 1 being really, really good, and 3 is a really good site as well. So we shouldn't have too many limitations when it comes to the trees that we're going to select in this particular site. Okay. So then if you want to, you can go in here and do a printable version. I don't know why they got this add to shopping cart thing in here. You don't have to pay money and put a credit card number or anything in there for that. It's just a formatting deal. But what this will do, it'll give you a map, legend, a lot of stuff on the legend, but then the biggest thing, it'll give you the tree shrub group and the description of what it is. Okay. There was one other little thing I wanted to show you in here. So you see this right here? This is a distance calculator thing. This allows you to draw a line to see how long the segment is. So that's like 473 feet, that line I just measured. So that'll be helpful when you're trying to figure out the width of your belt, and if you know that they want to have 14-foot spacing and how many rows, you just do the math and you're going to be able to come over so far, and you'd be able to draw your polygon. And then once your polygon is done, you could draw out the total length of this thing to be able to give you a measurement to be able to put your tree plan together. So that's another cool thing in Web Soil Survey. It actually has that measurement tool there. So
Ryan,
acres aren't that. Yep, go ahead.
after you draw your lines on there for the measuring, is there a way to keep those lines on there when you print the map or not?
Let's see here. I don't know. Let's see if it'll keep the line on there. You might just have to write it down. I don't think it's going to keep that line on there.
Okay,
But it does have the distance down here.
okay.
So once again, web soil survey is really the old soil survey books that a lot of the offices have in there. It's the way that we do our business now. But there's so much information in here about our soils. It's just unbelievable. And the platform's pretty good. It's pretty simple. They do updates on this, and it's stayed up to date. But there's all kinds of stuff in here. Okay. All right, I'm just looking through my notes on the web soil survey, and I think I covered what I wanted to cover there. Woodland Tech Note 42. Close out of some stuff here so we don't slow my computer down. Okay. All right, so our next thing, so now that we got our measurement, kind of where we're at, type of soils you're going to be dealing with, that's good. That's good information for the tree plan, but how are we going to put this tree plan together? So the best way to do that is to go to where that particular standard told us to go on a design for this. And that would be the Woodland Tech Note 42. Okay, so Tanya, can you still see my screen?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this was just updated here in May. So it's a very, very recent document, and hopefully it's more user-friendly than the ones prior in the past. But it does have a table of contents, which is kind of nice to be able to go through what you're looking for. It's not a terrible long tech note, because some of these tech notes can get very long. But basically, I'm just going to kind of go over some of the high points and some of the things that we're going to talk about in this training today. So tree and shrub groups. Okay, so that's kind of what we found based off web soil survey with those 10 main groups. We know the soils that we're going to be working with is a 3. All right. So what species do we have available to us? So you're going to want to use a 20-year height table, and we'll get into that. I'll show you what that looks like. And also inside the local NRCS offices in the conservation district place there, you'll see a blue North Dakota tree handbook. And so you can open that up, and any species in that book you can use as well. And we do have a link here to the online version if you don't have the hard copy one in your office. But species selection, it gives you some different things. Be cautious about Russian olive, where you're at in the world. Cedars can kind of be invasive. So especially if you're along riparian areas, green ash, with emerald ash borer, we're trying to figure out some different species for that particular one. It gives some recommendations. Try to not have the same species, at least 2 rows of the same species in the belt, and that's just diversity is a good thing, and just try to limit the disease. But that's just a recommendation. I mean, you get out where Mike is out by Custer, you're going to have a lot of limiting soils, and maybe there are only like 3-4 species that are going to grow out there. So that's fine. I mean, you just have to kind of know where you're at and document that on the tree plan or in the assistance notes. This is why I have 4 or 5 rows of cedars in my 8-row belt, because these are the only things that grow here. Orientation, any direction can maybe troublesome from a wind, as far as snow, wind erosion, and that type of thing. Setbacks, always look up for utilities. This is one thing. As when I first started with the agency, like I said, 20 years ago, I was doing a plan out in Hyde County, and it was kind of in the middle of nowhere. I really didn't think to even do this. It wasn't even by a farm site, but the guy, he want to do some calving in this area. So we designed this basically a farmstead windbreak so you could calve behind it. And I didn't look up, and there was big wappa lines running right through the northwest corner of this belt. So you definitely want to look up. It seems like it's really, really obvious, but you just need to look up at all times when you're dealing with utilities and that type of thing. We have some setbacks from roadways. These are good information. We updated these to follow what the state of South Dakota recommends now. You know, trying to keep the plantings far enough away from the roads so they are not going to cause a snowdrift problem. This is if you're on the south side of the road, how far away you'd want to be, you know, against the road, going with it, a little bit closer. Tree heights. So if you're doing like a living snow fence for your county, this would be the recommendation to stay that far away from the road. Now, you have to remember, as you know, working for the conservation district, every single county has some type of a zoning when it comes to tree planting, right? And you need to know your local county zoning. If your local county zoning is more restrictive than what is in this guide, you need to do that local county zoning guide. And I guess when I was in different counties, I always had a copy of that local county zoning, so I knew exactly what I was dealing with when I was talking to the landowner about trees. Because every county zoning it's really weird, because they'll say from the center line of the road, from the shoulder of the road. It's just that their explanations, where their start and stop point is, what they're measuring off of they're very, very different. So make sure that you know your local county zoning. Design heights, you know, we're going to look at that 20-year height, and that's on a table. We'll look at that. Density, it's always important to know the density of your belts and basically what you're trying to establish out there. So here's a table that kind of breaks down a density, and based off like resource concerns, I guess, if you will. So like for wind erosion, 3 to 5 rows of deciduous trees, crop protection, you can have a 1-row belt out there. Farmstead windbreak, 5 to 6 rows are usually dense enough. Air quality, we have some stuff in here, and so this is just a good table to kind of show you how density plays into windbreaks. And this link here kind of gives you some pictures of what 40 to 60% dense windbreak would look like. So there's just kind of a quick side note here, just evaluation of a density stand. So this would be if you were evaluating an older like CRP planting for a re-enroll. So a lot of our guides are set up to measure trees and determine if it meets the standards and specs a year after the tree was planted, the trees were planted. This allows you to come in here, go out in the field, look at the field windbreak, and do we still have a density enough to serve the resource concern? So for example, say 20 years ago, you planted a farmstead windbreak, and at the time it had 8 rows in it. Well, now it's down to 5 rows around that farmstead windbreak. 3 of the rows have died out. Well, if you got this kind of configuration, this is a density thing, you still have enough in there to protect it, and then you would be able to re-enroll it back into CRP. So that's the idea behind that. Okay. All right. So remember when we were talking about our standards, there was all these resource concerns in there. Doesn't this look familiar? So now we got more detailed information above and beyond that criteria that was in the standard. Okay, so field windbreak used for wind control, wind erosion. So wind erosion, it can be designed to protect against damaging winds from any direction. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you're planting this belt on the northwest, which are the primary wind directions, but on the east and south as well. So, and if you've been in South Dakota for very long, you know the wind is always going to blow, and it's going to blow from any direction. And if you think about wind erosion and when are the 2 times when the soil is really acceptable? a lot of times is when the farmers are doing their tillage. So it's in the spring, but they also do a lot of tillage in the fall. And which direction does the wind blow from? Predominantly in the fall, it's from the south. So you get a lot of south winds when there's a lot of fall tillage going on. So we have a lot of wind erosion out there. So we're always going to base our heights off the 20-year height. We want a 40 to 60% dense windbreak, and that's getting back up to our table we just kind of went on. And we're always going to look at our tolerance losses of T. That's what this tons per acre per year means. And I got a table that we'll kind of get into here in a little bit with a field windbreak. Windbreak snow harvest, we're not going to really get into that. We don't really use that purpose too much in South Dakota. This will be something that you will run into as you're planting trees. You'll have a county superintendent come up to you, a road guy, wanting to do some type of a living snow fence. So here's some design criteria how to do a living snow fence. Okay, so today we're going to also talk about a building site protection, and so this is kind of where we'd get the guide for that. So a couple different distances that you want to pay attention to here. Windward row, so that'd be up in here, needs to be a minimum of 200 feet away from the structure. Okay, so we don't, wind and snow, they have a weird way of doing things, and we don't want to get the trees too close to the structure, because what will happen, all that snow will come over top of the trees and it'll just dump right onto your building or driveway area, that type of thing. So that's why we have these setbacks.
Ryan, on that one, with our grants that we fill out for the Conservation Commission,
Yep.
we have to stay 300 feet from any structure.
Okay.
So
All right.
just a note for everybody.
Okay. Right. So then that's getting back to my earlier point. If you had something that was more restrictive, you would definitely want to use that one. So instead of this 200 feet. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So a couple different other guidelines that you want to follow with designing these. You know, for the best performance of these things, you want to get them at least 160 to 200 feet beyond the structure here. That's what that's talking about. And we have major land resource unit areas. And we're going to get into that here once we get into our tree planting. So basically it's a soils thing is what we're looking at here. And where we're planting today on my dad's farm, he's in 55C. So that's where he's at. And 7 rows is the minimum rows to achieve that winter protection for that. But if you do a couple different things, you can reduce the rows. So basically you can take a 7 row and go down to, but basically about a 6 row in that part of the world with a 55C. If you plant a spruce or juniper or cedar in your first windward row, if you have a windbreak less than 600 feet, you know, upwind of this belt, that type of thing. A couple other guidelines, if you think about snow storage, so the wider your tree belt is, the more space out the rows are, the more your snow you're going to store inside that tree belt. So that's why they have that number in here for that. And it says a narrow windbreak is permissible. So narrow would be less rows, right? Especially if you have a shrub in there and a couple deciduous or coniferous rows, because you're not always going to be able to get 7 to 8 rows up around these farms of windbreaks. You might have a property thing. The house might be too close. It's just not a perfect world, but try to get it as close as possible. And when you're designing this something, if it's a little bit different than what this technical guide lays out, always just write down your decision process, and you can do that on the tree plan. You could do it in assistance notes, why your decision was the way it was. So this is talking about linear or leeward windbreaks. So basically on the south or east side. So they're a good thing to have as well. Noise screen, that's another purpose of these. I've done a few of these in my career. It's got a design thing here for noise screens, visual screens. Wildlife. So if you want to do a a tree belt, you know, enhanced for wildlife. You know, it's selecting the species that are native to the area, that provide good food and cover for wildlife species, using some grasses, upwind of the belt. We have a fact sheet for these shrub clump plantings designs to make it more look like a thicket out there. You know, add additional rows and all that kind of stuff. We'll buy that one. Irrigation we'll go by carbon storage. All right, so now we're going to get into the actual guts of how we're going to decide to plant this, okay? All right, so these are suggested row arrangements. Does not mean that it has to be done this way, but these are suggestions. Anything in an NRCS technical guide has years and years and years of experience behind it. And what's laid out in here is what NRCS has seen to have the best success. So it's always important that you try to follow this as close as possible. But your sites will always be different, soils, space, everything will always be limiting. So you always have to just plan according to your site. So guidelines for road arrangements. For windbreaks less than 5 rows, any of these rows are acceptable. So the way you would read this is the number of your belt, rows of your belt. And we know on the farm there, we're going to do a 7 or 8 row belt. So we're going to be looking at these two deals. And here's our, we're going to do a field windbreak as well, which is going to be consistent of 5 rows. So with your shrubs, your cedars, where do you put those? Your deciduous trees, your pine, where's a good place to put your pines if you do a pine, and your tall trees in a 5 row belt, vice versa. So that's how you would read that chart. Any windbreak greater than 10 rows, basically you just want to pay attention to the tall deciduous trees in there on that one. It gives you some guides in here for snow breakage. Mid-sized trees can withstand a crushing. Strongly recommended row 2. Additionally, evergreen planted in row 1. You probably shouldn't put a shrub in row number 2. So if you're going to do a spruce or a cedar on the outside row, just because what snow can do to it. Here's kind of a neat little guide when it comes to juniper and cedar. Depending on where you put them, is that have them about 10 foot apart for heavy snow conditions if they are the windward row. So just a typical profile, I guess, if you will, of what a belt could look like. Spacing guidelines. Okay, and these are for new plantings. And these guidelines, we kind of up these distances a little bit. Over the years, working with conservation districts, working with CRP and FSA, we've had a lot of people come in and want to move trees because they're getting too close together. And a lot of the species just weren't surviving quite as well. So we did take a look at the spaces. And it's basically, this is broken out into the first row up here, and then the interior leeward row. So your shrubs, 3 to 6. And then if you got a shrub inside the belt, it would be a 4 to 6. 8 to 12, 8 to 12 stays the same. 8 to 10 for cedars on the outside and 10 to 16 on the inside. Tall trees, 12 to 14, pine, spruce, and then cottonwoods down here, and poplars, silver maple, white poplar, and belts with willows and that, you know, have them over 20 feet in your leeward rows. Okay, so between row spacing, on average, most of your tree belts are going to be, your between rows are going to be between 14 to 16 feet. A more common one that I see, I guess, when I go around is 14 feet. Try not to go over 20 feet, but your between row spacing. And if you do a tree belt, you should always have an isolation strip. These would be the strips on the windward and the leeward side of the belt. Making sure that you have enough space there for the producer to go in there and mow down the rows or do anything like that. If you have a fence over there, you're going to want to do your average of spacing and +4. So if my average spacing is 14 feet, I'm going to want to have 18 feet from that last row closest to that fence. So this kind of gives you, yep, go ahead.
Can you explain that isolation strip for me? That's a new term.
Okay, so yeah, I sure can. So what an isolation strip would be, so if you take a look at this profile, what it's talking about, so this is the in-between row spacing, Michael. So you got 14 feet, 14 feet, 14 feet, 14 feet, 14 feet, right? Pretend there's a fence out here on this side. You're going to want to have that space 14 feet, then plus 4. So that fence should be 18 feet away from this isolation. So this is really the isolation row. Then over here, you might have a field of corn and soybeans. So you want to be 14 feet away from that because they're going to probably be using chemicals and those type of things. And just for drift, maybe they're doing some tillage, you know, because you can creep into here because your fabric's going to come out. Your average fabric is 6 foot, so you're 3 foot over here. So you could get really close to that fabric. So that's why it's good to have an isolation strip, Michael. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, you bet. Thank you for the question. Keep them coming. Do we have any questions in the chat, or has that been pretty quiet?
Nope, that's pretty quiet right now.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so this, once getting back to this, specialty design, to show you kind of what you'd be able to do with your roads and machinery gaps and just all that, how to put one together for a farmstead windbreak. Twin rows, I know there's one conservation district that still does this. I think it's down by Parkston. Not a real common thing in our state, but we still have that in there. So really 20,000 foot view of this guide. This is a guide that you should print off and have in a Thunderbook or something and review from time to time, you know, to help you be successful in designing your tree plantings. Okay, so now, so we talked about web soil survey. Excuse me, went to the Woodland Techno 42. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our South Dakota CPA 6 or our tree form. Okay. Okay, Tanya, will you let me know if you can see this?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, so here is the South Dakota CPA 6 tree form, and this is a document that we've used for years, ever since I've been here. But in the past, I would say, let's see, at least 5 to 6 years, we made it into a tool. And it's got a lot of neat little features in here, and we'll kind of get into that. But basically, the guts of it, the tree form, is just starting out right up on top. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to fill this out as much as possible. So we're going to call this Forbes Farms. The trees are going to be planted in 2021. We're in Kingsbury County. Farm number 1, tract number 1, field number 1. So these would be FSA lingo. We're going to do a field windbreak. It's conservation practice 380. We're going to do it for continuous CRP. And here's this major land resource area. Okay, so that's what I was talking about with the soils. So we're in Kingsbury County. So we're in northwestern Kingsbury County, right up in here. So if you look at where we're at, that's 55C. If we were in Brookings County, it'd be 102A. And the reason that's important to get that right, and sometimes you might be kind of right on that line, so you're just going to have to decide what side of the line that you're on. 102A, you're going to have quite a bit more option. It's just a little bit better soil when it comes to trees. The further west you get, the harder these things are going to be when it comes to that 20-year height table. Some of the species might not even be available to you, depending on what you do there. So you want to make sure You have
Do you
that
have a
there.
question?
Could you repeat that, please?
Kristen's raising her hand. Do you have a question? You can always put it in the chat too.
Yep, I think she's gonna have to chat. All right, I'll just keep going. If she types in a question, let me know, Tanya.
Okay.
So we have a resource concern.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. She is having trouble getting into the chat also, so she can't ask questions that way either.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'll try and help her.
Okay, could she text one of you too, or that too? We
Yeah.
could do that. Yeah.
That's what she's
Yeah,
doing.
Okay, thank you. Just when she gets that question, just yell it out, please. All right. Present ground cover. Well, on that field we looked at, a web soil survey with soybeans, okay? So you're going to want to ask the producer or the farmer what they had for herbicides, and why is that? Because herbicides can have some carryover when it comes to trees. Products like atrazine, those type of products, there's a 2-year carryover when it comes to trees. And there's guides out there that will tell you that. But the best thing to do is figure out what chemical they put on that land the year before and find the actual product label. And you can actually pull up the product label and basically like you're reading it right off the jug on a Google search or that type of thing. And it will tell you how long you have to not plant trees in that particular site. We're not going to do a fallow in there. There's no utilities. We did look up, and we're going to do the one call, and we did not do culture resources out there because this is the CRP, and we do not need to address culture resources. The only thing we're going to do is we're going to have Lyle go out there and do basically a light disc to kind of level out the land a little bit. We're going to do the planting method. We're going to do a machine. He does want some tree fabric, and he wants some grass seeding between the rows. So the planting assistance is done by me. Down here in the front of this page of this form is we have practice certification. So this would be when you planted it, who it was planted by, does it meet the standard specifications, and you certify by it. How was it measured? You'd put the actual fabric and everything in here and how you actually measured it. You'd also be able to put the performance or take a picture and put it by the tree planter or whatever in there. And we'll get into job approval authority at the very end of this, and that's when you'd be able to certify off on this stuff. Okay, so this is the second part of the tool. And the good thing about this tool, there is a video that explains exactly how this tool works. And I think it's down here. Right here. And that's in the technical information tab. Okay. And you'll be able to click on that video, and Mark walks you through this entire workbook and everything in it. And in fact, this month, we're going to update this video because this tree form that you're looking at, it has a little bit, some other functions in it, and it hasn't been updated in a while. So definitely, we're taking the time to watch this video and the new one that's going to be released on this, because this was a 2016 video. But there's a lot of information on this particular worksheet. So what these are is the CBA 6 Establishment 1. This E stands for establishment. So now here we go. So now this is what our tree plan looks like. So you kind of start up here at the top. Our site number is going to be 1. MLRA. Remember, we did this in the front page, but it's also good to double check this to know that we're in the right spot. So we got that up there, 55C. Tree and shrub groups. Sites. Well, when we did our web soil survey, we found out our group was a site 3, right? So that's that. And if we click over here, we have a whole bunch of tabs, and I'm trying to find the one. Here's another link to the video. And this is probably a better way to get to that video thing, because you can actually open this up and see the full video. And there's a timeline, so you can click on these if you don't want to see the renovation part or the establishment part, or maybe you're just into the tools. You can jump to those links. So, conservation tree shrub groups. So remember what I said, that Ethan soil, Clarinol Ethan soil that we had, CEB? What does that mean? Here's a group 1. Group 1 is really good soil. There's really no restrictions when it comes to this particular soil. Group 2, the water table is probably going to be high here. These are going to be more wet sites. Group 3 is a really good soil as well. Group 4, decent. There's a 4C. 5, now you're kind of getting more into a sandy soil, more of an upland. 6D, now you're really kind of getting into a restrictive layer into that. 6G, you're getting into some gravel here on that particular site. Site 7 can be a tough site. Site 8, and it takes you through what all these sites mean. In group 10, basically, we got all kinds of problems out there. Something with the depth, the texture, the drainage, the slope. It's not recommended to plant any type of trees on a group 10 soil, especially if you're getting into a CRP or an equip or something like that for cost share. It's just group 10 soils are really a no-no when it comes to trying to plant trees out there. But if you run into that and there's existing trees out there and something kind of looks funny with the soils map, you can use our area soil scientists. They can come out and take a look at the actual site and see if the map is see if the soils map is actually accurate or not. And typically they are, but it's always good to have someone come out there and take a look at it. All right, so we're going to get back into our tree plan. Based off our web soil survey search, when we did our area of interest, we found out that our soil was this CBA, and it is a group 3. So I put group 3 all the way down here. Now our isolation, we're going to stick with 14. But say, and the way you do these tree plans, if you remember my map, our belt was running north to south. So basically, we're going to start on the west side of the belt and work our way east. So that's the orientation of how you put these tree plans together. All right. So we got our MLRA 55C up here, and we got our spacing. Like I said, that 14 foot seems to be a pretty good one. We don't have any fences or roads, so we're just for our isolation strip. We're going to leave that alone at 14. But if we did have a fence on the east side of this, you could jump that up to 18 feet. So basically anything with green is a fill-in. All right. So here is like a typical belt that you could put together, you know, visiting with the producer what they like. I know my parents, they like lilac, so I threw that in there. They also do like cedar, so I put cedar in the second row. In honey locust, a little bit taller species, then bur oak, and then the spruce at the end for this particular belt. So there's a couple different ways that you can do this in here. So this is a site 3. And if you notice these little kind of green little check marks in here, if I go down and put a, let's see here, I'm trying to think which one would. I know which one will work in here. So for whatever reason, we're going to go to here to this bur oak roll, taller one, and he really likes cottonwood. So I'm going to put cottonwood in there. What just happened here? This red thing kind of came up, and what's going on here in our tab down here, we're going to go to our 20-year height table, and that's in that Woodland Tech Note 42. It's explaining this 20-year height table, and we're in east central South Dakota is where we would be in a 55C. So here's all our groups that we just went over, right? So they're all up here. They got the species broken out by a common name, deciduous, and then coniferous down here. You kind of, whoop, actually I'm gonna go the other way. So why did that thing, and the tree plan, the way Mark designed this is pulling this information in here automatically. So if we go down to Cottonwood, which is right here, and we scroll over, you notice that here's our site 3, and we come down to here, that's blank. What that is telling us, from 3 all the way to group 10, which group 10 is not even on this list, because I remember what I said, that group 10 is just a no-no. Cottonwood really likes his feet wet. So group 1, well, basically you can do about anything on those. 1K is usually typical of more of a wet, and 2 and 2K are definitely more of a wet site. Okay. So the species of Cottonwood likes his feet wet. So all these other sites, 3 all the way up to 9W, are going to be too dry, too gravelly, something for that particular species. So that's why it's throwing that red check mark in our tree plan. Okay, here a couple other things on this table as long as we're here. Maturity at height. So this is when the tree is mature, we can expect, if all things are perfect and that cottonwood doesn't get disease or gets knocked down by a storm or something like that, it could be 80 feet once it's tall. In 20 years, if this was planted on a 2K site or a 2 site, class 2 site, it would be 35 to 40 feet tall in 20 years. So you see the difference? 80 versus 35 to 20, or 35 to 40, I'm sorry. Okay, any questions on this table? So if your species, and that's the other thing, if your species that you're looking for isn't on this table or isn't in that North Dakota tree handbook, that's when we're going to have to start looking at a variance or waiver process. And not that we can't do that, it's just you'd have to work with your local district conservationist and have them request the species that you'd like to try planting out there. That request would come up to me. I'll either suggest it to our state resource conservationist, Jessica Mahalski at the state office, or I'll just tell them, no, we're not going to do that, and just return it back to the DC, and it just ends there. So but we definitely want to try different species out there and try to get as much diversity out there as possible. So, but these are the ones that have been proven to work. All right, so let's get back to our plan. Okay, so I'm going to switch that back to bur oak. So let's look at this plan. So when we read through our Woodland Tech Note 42, it said that basically we could have, for wind erosion, we could have 1 to 3 rows, and potentially up to 5 if wildlife was kind of a factor as well. So this producer wants to do 5 rows. So, and let's take a look at lilac. There's our lilac, cedar, honey locust, bur oak, and spruce. We got 6 feet there. That's from one plant to the next plant. 16 feet for our cedar. Honey locust, a little bit bigger species, I went with 12. Bur oak, I went 18. And Black Hills spruce, I went 18. And typically with the spruce tree, if you plant them about 18 feet apart, at maturity, that's about when they would be touching each other. You get much closer than that, what'll happen, they'll grow into each other. You just won't have enough air movement through those trees, and they will kill each other out. All right, so how did I come to this type of design, or how did I put this together? Okay, so this is the cool thing about this workbook. It has all the information right out of the Woodland Tech Note 42 that we did. So I tried to make this look similar to this. Just kind of going up and down. Right here, here's my shrub. First row, windbreaks, 3 to 6 feet. Well, I'm pretty sure my lilac, common lilac, is a shrub, and it's 8 to 10 foot tall in 20 years. So if I go back to my design tab, 3 to 6, and I when I try to do this, I try to always use the bigger number. I guess that's just kind of what I do. But to each their own on that. Then if I come down to, actually I want to go up. Okay, so let's look at my 5-row belt. Where can I put my shrubs? Where it would be a suggested place. There's a row 1, 2, and 5. Well, I want to be able to drive along that tree belt and see those lilacs, so I'm going to put them in row 1, and this says that that's a good place to put that. So if I go back to my tree plan again, row 1, common lilac, I went 6 for in-row spacing. So I got that down. Cedar, all right. In row 2, is that a good idea? How tall is my cedar gonna get? So I'm gonna come down here to my coniferous planting. Roll on over, 20-year height. I'm gonna get about 14 to 16 feet out of that guy. All right, so let's go to my design. Right here, we got a cedar and juniper column. Hey, it says go to row 2, right? And if you remember these kind of guidelines for row arrangement, you know, putting cedar on the outside and trying to, you know, to adjust the spacing, we're not doing that. We're not putting our shrub on the inside of that cedar row on the row 2, so we're not going to have anything to do with snow. So that's a good thing. So all right, so my cedars and junipers. Now I'm on the interior of my belt, right? So I'm gonna look at, okay, here's my cedars and junipers, 10 to 16 feet. So let's go back to my tree plan. Which is this one. 16 foot, I got a 14-foot space. All right, so honey locust. So I kind of want to get that pyramid look again. So honey locust, a little bit taller tree. So let's take a look at that one. Where am I at my honey locust heights? Right here's honey locust. If I go on over, so this baby is going to get 50 feet tall at maturity and around 20 to 22 feet on a group 3 soil at the 20-year height. All right. So if I go back to my tree plan, okay. So I said at my 20-year height, 18, one more thing here. My 20-year height here was 20 to 22 feet, height at maturity. So if I go to my design, more of a mid-size, 25-foot tall tree. I'm in row 3, so I can do that. That can get fairly tall too. So I'm there, I'm good there. So site 3 or row 3 is good there, and row 3 is good there for a 5-row belt. So go back to my tree plan. Right here, there's my honey locust. Okay, bur oak. Okay, same process. You just kind of work your way through this. Go back to your 20-year height. There's shrubs. We're going to get into deciduous trees. Bur oak is right there. 17 to 19 feet right there, 50 feet. Okay. So similar maturity height. We're in row 4, so we can do a mid-size or tall right there, so we're good there. What about our spacing? 12 to 18 feet is where you'd want to be for interior rows, mid-size or a tall. Go back to my design. So this book isn't really going to tell you or correct you in here, this workbook, if you adjust these in different row arrangements or the spacing is a little bit off. That's why it's important that you just kind of toggle back and forth until you get a feel for these tree designs. Black Hill Spruce, start the process all over again. You go here, we're going to come down to our Coniferous. Here's our Black Hill Spruce. They're going to be 18 to 20 feet at the end of the 20-year height. Or they're about 50 feet tall, but 18 to 20 on a 20-year height here. All right, so we're going to go back to our design. 18 feet. We're going to want to put fabric on all these rows. Our linear, you got to remember, we measured how long our belt was going to be. So every row is 1,400 feet, running north to south. And we have fabric, and we're going to want to put some tree tubes on some of these. Lilac, we won't want to put tree tubes on. Cedars, we don't. Spruce, we don't. But these two species here, we definitely do, especially the burr oak, because burr oak is like candy to deer. So we definitely want to have tree tubes in there. And in fact, I think there is tree, is this the one? Maintenance. Tree protectors. This is not the most up-to-date Woodland Tech Note 34 for tree tubes, and that's in the Field Office Tech Guide as well. And we actually have a list of trees that it's good to put tree tubes on. So I'll have Mark update that tab. All right, so if you would want to alternate, you could click on this, and then you want to alternate to similar species as far as maturity, height, growth patterns, and all those type of things. So that's how you could do that. And our next design thing here, I'll kind of get into that a little bit. So are there any questions on just this simple 5-row field windbreak? Any questions in the chat, Tanya? No?
Quick comment for you.
Yes.
I have never planted cedar at anything other than 10 feet.
Okay.
So this is kind of awakening.
So if we go back, so let's take a look at that example. So if we go to our design, so cedars, what the recommendations would be 8 to 10, and then 10 to 16 on the interior.
Hmm.
And then
So,
if
you are doing a CRP plan, Ryan, or one of the RDCs were, and they're putting their 20 feet apart, is that still approved?
Can you repeat that?
If the DC in our area is doing a CRP plan and
Okay.
putting cedar trees 20 feet apart, would that be approved, or does he have to get approval to do that?
Well, at 20 feet apart, that's really kind of outside our specification. They would have to have some type of justification why they would be planting them, because if you think about 20 foot apart, so if one of those species die, Well, now you're 40 foot from tree to tree. And a lot of times this cedar and juniper, this was one that we updated a little bit because that used to say like 6 to 8 or something like that. And 6 feet together with cedars, that's just too close. They are crowding each other out. It's a tough species and that, and so that's why we upped it. And my mentality is I want to give these trees as much space as possible. So that's why when I look at this these tables, I tried to go with the bigger number, I guess, too. Peggy would be another reason that I do it that way.
Okay.
So, because I've just had so many people come in and say, I want to move these trees because they're too close. And why do we plant them too close? Because we expect some failure out there and replants and all that, especially when it's not in a yard setting where they can put some type of irrigation on them. But we're just, the trees are growing pretty well, especially on the eastern side of South Dakota. The further west you get, you might want to go a little bit closer together just because you might be losing some more out there because it just gets drier and the soils are just tougher, right? But over here, you know, along the interstate in eastern South Dakota, we get quite a bit of rain. The soils are usually pretty good for trees. So that's, I guess, my reasoning behind it. So
We got another question. So
Sure.
what would you recommend instead of juniper cedar, especially in the area where they spread?
instead of that,
Yeah.
oh, if you're looking for coniferous, spruce would be fine. Spruce trees, pines would be fine as well. So, yep. Yeah, you definitely want to pay attention to cedars where you're putting them. There is no doubt about that. So, when I started
I
out,
noticed
like,
that
go ahead.
you never have cottonless cottonwood listed. Are we not supposed to be planting that? Because we do a lot of planting of cottonless cottonwood, and that's not on it's not on your form at all.
Cottonwood is on there.
But not the hybrid. So does it matter? I mean, because we just write in cottonless most often.
Yeah, as long as it's a cottonwood species that. So basically, what you're talking about, if it has the seeds or not, and most people don't want the fuzz, you know, flying all over. So that those
Right.
are the ones that mostly be planted. Back in the 80s and 90s, it was kind of the other way. So, so yeah, you're fine there.
Okay.
Okay, another question.
Sure.
Example, cottonwoods in soil 3+. If there's a plan to irrigate, would you recommend?
No, I would not. I guess I would stick to that site capabilities and where that species should live. Just for the simple fact, how long are you going to irrigate, and that type of thing. I would really try to put these species where they belong in the right soils, because they're so hard to get going anyways, and we want to give them the best ability to have the best chance of survivability. And that's why following the recommendations in these tech notes and the soils and all that are so important to give them the best chance, because we're in a grassland prairie here in South Dakota. Trees weren't really a thing here before we settled in this country, especially along the rivers and that type of thing. There was pockets of trees and that type of thing, but in a grass prairie ecosystem, that really goes against trees, and that's why it's important to know the soil and know what you're dealing with. So my recommendation would be no, not to do that. So does that make sense?
Okay, one more question. She heard that male hybrid would have a shorter life. Is that true?
Could you repeat the question, Tanya?
Male hybrid cottonwood, does that have a shorter life?
I do not know the answer to that. I've heard that too, but I do not know how much truth is behind that. Cottonwoods can live a long time. I know that. It's one of the species, if you drive around in the landscape, you can see some really, really, really old cottonwood trees. So
Quite often we hear that, you know, and they break off all the time in storms. And I think it's because they grow faster, so they're not as strong. But I think that we've heard like 15 to 20 years. I've seen them live longer than that, but that's kind of what we were hearing.
okay, any other questions before we
I
move
got
on?
another one for you. Okay, what happens if you have a straight stretch of trees and in a small section of it, the soil types is 10, Chinese elm and green ash are currently growing in the area now?
Okay, that's a really good question. There, and I'll go back here to this tree plan here. Yeah, this is perfect case scenario where the soils are that group 3 all the way through. But just say that you have, we're doing 1,400 feet. And from the north edge of that belt, and you could put this in here, north to south at 700 feet or something like that is group 10 soil. And you can put like do not plant in there or whatever, or maybe the soil changes. Maybe it goes from this group 3 to a 2, so a wet site. So cedar and honey locust and bur oak and spruce, they're not going to want to really be in there. So what you could do is you could come down here and make kind of a secondary plan for that. So you just would start out again and just kind of describe where you're at in the tree planting and put like willows in there. And maybe you do 5 rows of willows right through that. At the 700 foot mark, there's 150 feet of a group 2 soil that's really wet. You can plant trees in there. It's not a wetland. It's just a high water table thing. And you're going to have 5 rows of willow for 150 feet. And you could describe that down here in your notes, comments, on your tree. Probably the best place to describe it too would also be on your tree, on your plan map as well. But never feel that you just always have to plant these belts that are straight through. Alternation is important, but getting back to the question, if that's a group 10 and you see other trees in there, you could document in the assistance notes or on this tree plan that these species are out there. So we do know it supports trees. But once again, if you don't feel comfortable digging in the soil and kind of going through that, what the soil is, you can get a hold of the local district conservationist, and then they can get a hold of the area soil scientist, and they can come out and take a look at that soil, excuse me, and determine if that soil really is a group 10 soil or not. So that's the process that you would go through there. So, but they would take that all into account if there's trees growing there and all those type of things. So soils are very diverse, and with 100, 150 feet, it can change on a dime when it comes to soils too. That's why it's important to know that soil's out there. So does that answer the question? Kind of a long answer, but it's a complicated, tree plants can get really, really complicated just because of the soils.
I think you're good, Ryan.
Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our web soil survey. All right. And we're going to go right down the road. Go back to the same farm, but just in a different spot. A little hand button lets you kind of toggle. All right, so the plan is we're gonna put a house out here on top of this hill along this road here. And they already got the basement poured and everything, and so you go out there and you're looking at it. So, and the acreage is gonna be something. Yes. Okay, so about 8 acres. So we're gonna come back in here, we're gonna pull up a soils map. It's 8.8 acres is a Clarinolithan loam. Then our next move is Soil Data Explorer again. Go to land classifications, tree shrub group, and view rating. You come down here, look at there, we got a group 3 soil again, so that's good. And then sometimes the other thing, getting back to that other question that we just had, sometimes there can be little pockets of inclusions inside these soils. So there might be a wet tonka in here. That's like a group 10 soil or something like that. So that's why we just have to pay attention on boots on the ground, using your eyes and understanding where you're planting these trees, because these soils maps are fairly accurate, but just the scale that they're mapped to, they're not always going to pick up on all those little inclusions out there. But that's a pretty good site. So setbacks, you're going to want to come along here and go like there. So you could do that measurement. So I got that measurement about 400 feet. Now I'm going to come from here and go along here. So right around 720 feet. So that'll give me my belts that I have out there. Okay, so oopsie. We're going to go back to our tree planting guide. Okay. So we're going to have a belt running north and south, and then one running east and west on the north side of this house. And then we're just going to assume that we remember going through the Woodland tech note. We got the trees so far away from the house that 200, if I was doing that grant like you guys brought up, I'd have it 300 feet away. I'm so far away from the road. I don't have no overhead utilities in this farm site, since it's kind of a brand new farm site yet. It's all underground, that type of thing. So I've taken all that into caution. So I'm still in 55C. And if you remember our design guide, we needed anywhere from 7 to 8 or 6 to 7, 8 rows in a 55C. So we're going to do 7 rows here because we want a decent windbreak. That farm's going to be there a long time, so we want a decent belt out there. And so we're going to start on the one side. So we start off with common lilac, because once again, they like lilac. And let's go to our design on this. East Central South Dakota, and we kind of already been through this with lilac. We know it's going to work there because it's green, right, in our spreadsheet, but we can come back and kind of double check that. Common lilac is right here. There's an 8 to 10. That's how tall it's going to be in her 20-year height. In maturity, it's going to be about 12 foot tall. Okay, so if I go to my design, I'm doing a 7-row belt, right? That's considered a shrub, so I can put that in the first row. And remember, I come down to here, windward row, shrub, tree is 6. All right, so let's go back to my design. This E2 establishment, E3 establishment right here. So 6, there's my 400 foot. This is my site number 1. So if I scroll down here, this would be on my west side of my house. That's running north and south. So I'm starting on my west side. Remember, this goes from north to west for your orientations. Got 14-foot spacing, 14-foot isolation. That's what I'm going to have. My cedar, I'm going to do the kind of the same thing I did with my field windbreak. I'm going to have that row 2 in there. Going to go 16 feet on that. So if I go back to my design, am I kind of within what my guide would say? Junipers and cedars, 10 to 16 feet on the interior. Okay, let's go up to here. Cedars, row 2, 7. So I got a match and a match there. So I'm in good shape there with my cedar. Go back to my guide. Hackberry. Okay, 18 feet is kind of where I want to plant it. It can get pretty tall, and bur oak, both those species. Okay, kind of a mid-size to a tall size, both of these species of trees. So if we go back to our design, go down here to deciduous. So we got our hackberry, 8 to 20, 55 foot tall. Bur oak, 50 foot tall, and 17 to 19. So pretty similar in size. Let's go to my design. Get back to my 7 row, mid-sized trees. Rows 3 and 4. Tall trees, rows 3 and 4 on a 7 row belt. So we're good there. What am I looking at for spacing? Mid-sized trees, 8 to 12 on the interior, 12 to 18. So I'm going to lean more. These are going to get tall, more of a tall tree at maturity, because they were at least at 50 feet at maturity, according to my table. So now if I go back to my establishment here, there's 18, threw those in there. I got my 400 foot. For my total length, each row is 400 feet. So now, I'm going to switch it up on you a little bit. We're going to do a silver maple. The thing about silver maples, they get really, really big. And in fact, I've been out on some tree sites in Kingsbury County where they planted silver maple, and you couldn't tell that there's a green ash row on either side of it, because the green ash rows are completely gone. And it looks like they didn't even need to be there. That's how big these trees can get. Silver maple are a huge tree. So if you notice what I did here. What was that?
I got a question about the silver maples right beside the bur oak. I was out at another planting that was done before I was here. And they did the silver maples on the left side of the bur oaks. So the silver maples grow so dang fast, they were already shading out the bur oak and stunting the growth of the bur oak. So is that good to put those two beside each other?
I mean, a hackberry will grow a little bit faster than a bur oak, so you could switch that around, Tanya. So this is just an example, but your personal knowledge, you could absolutely do that. But if you notice what I did here, I went from 14 foot between row space and I went to 20 foot. For my silver maple. You see what I did there? Okay. And then I went 20 foot to my Black Hill spruce here. The reason I did that is exactly what you're saying. The silver maple grows so fast that they will shade everything out. And back in our design guide, if you remember this, back in here, our between rows spacing. So this is our in between row spacing for these silver maples 20. But down in here, this right here, several species required due to rapid growth rates. Rows of coniferous deciduous should not be established within 20 feet of cottonwoods, poplars, silver maple, poplar, and tree willows. So right there in that guide, it speaks to having those rows spread out. Now, what does that mean? Someone's going to have to get off the tractor and go back and move that marker out, right, during this tree plant. But that's okay, because we want this tree plant to be successful in that planting. So if I come back to my deal, that's what I did here. I went 20 foot from my silver maple to my bur oak, and I went 20 foot from my silver maple to my Black Hill spruce, and my in-row spacing is 20 feet. So it's basically 20 by 20. So if you think about that, those species like cottonwood, silver maple, those type of things, think of like a 20 by 20 square around them to when you're planting these things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, you bet. All right, so we're gonna move on to my Black Hill spruce. All right, I kind of want these, I don't want them any closer than 18 foot, as I like to look at them when they're barely about touching each other, and that's right around 18 feet. Well, let's take a look at my design. Am I kind of close on that? Go up here, spruce, interior, 12 to 20. I went 18, so I'm within the specification there. 7 rows, spruce, row 6. It looks like it's good there, so I'm good to go. Well, to finish this belt out, I'm gonna wanna, they like to make some jam and that type of thing, so they decided to do some choke cherry out there. More of a shrub, right? 6 foot there to kind of match the lilac, and put 400 feet there. Fabric on everything here, and then I wanted tree tubes on the hack, bur oak, and the silver maple are the 3 species that I'd like to put the tree tubes on right away, just to protect from deer and those type of things. So this is our belt that's on the west side of our house, running north to south. So we started on the west side and we worked our way to the east, if you can visualize that. And this is site number 2. And you can mark these sites down here on your location map. You have your section and number, township range number. I don't have that filled in here, and you can use these drawings down here to orientate how they look on the map. A lot of times I'll put that right on the conservation plan map where the aerial imagery is on it, what site numbers they are. If you want to, you can do like a JPEG picture of your conservation plan map and insert a picture in here. I've done that in the past as well, which is handy for the tree crew as well to see that. All right, so we covered the west belt. So now we're going to go on the north side of the house, and we're going to kind of do something a little bit different here. Once again, I like that lilac and cedar, so I'm kind of making these look similar. So we know we've been through this design before, 6 foot, 16 foot on these. That's fine. So here's this alternating thing. So hackberry and honey locust. I want to alternate these 2 different species, and that's okay. The one thing that we can do, and I definitely recommend doing some type of alternation. The thing that, you know, we preach all the time with our grasses, our crop rotation is diversity, 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 right? We should have the same mentality with trees. So don't feel bad about trying to do an alternation in row. The thing that you got to remember with alternating species is how tall do they get? How wide do they get? How aggressive are they? Do they sucker? Are they native? Are they, how fast do they spread out? Do wildlife, do they like them? So you want to have all those things kind of in line with the trees that you alternate on the same row. And where you find out that information is this Woodland Tech Note here that I'm going to pull up. This is called the Woodland Tech Note 37. And this gives you an idea of all the categories that I just kind of spoke about: native, mature height, spread. Are they good for wildlife, food, and cover? But these are the things that you'd want to know right here. It'd be how tall they get, how fast they grow would be another one. So I already have hackberry and honey locust kind of highlighted. They're both native. they're going to get right around 40 to 60 feet tall. Their crown width are fairly similar, 45 to 50. And they have somewhat of a same growth pattern, a medium and a fast. And if you go down here to the bottom, this kind of tells you what that means. A medium to fast. A fast is 2 foot or more per year, and a medium is 1 to 2 feet per year. That's what you can expect a growth of those particular species, mature heights, crown width, varieties, if native, and all the stuff is listed down here. But that's how you would determine plants, their characteristics, if you should put them in the row together. So for example, you would not want to put like a cottonwood and a shrub together in the same row or something like that. Very, very drastic differences. You know, it's just the cottonwood just going to take over the row, basically.
Where
So
is this sheet?
So this is the Woodland Techno 37, and that would be in the field office tech guide. And I don't know if Mark actually has. So 1 second here, and going through all these tabs. Technical information. Right here is Woodland Techno 37, Tanya. You'd be able to click on this link and it'd take you right there inside this workbook. It's really kind of cool. And here's the
Nice.
Woodland Tech 42 as well. So all that stuff is right in there. But that would be the document that you would use to kind of figure out different characteristics of those species. At least that's what I use. Okay. All right, so let's get back to our tree plan.
So Ryan, there's another question. When wouldn't you use fabric?
When would you not use fabric?
Yeah.
Well, if you were doing like a wildlife planting, a clump planting, those type of scenarios where you want to make it more look like a thicket, maybe you got a species that really likes to sucker, like a plum or something like that. Those species, you can put fabric down on them, but the kind of their mannerisms, I guess, if you will, they want to sucker. That's how they kind of spread. So that fabric will kind of hinder that. So maybe you use the fabric to get them going, and then 3 to 5 years later, you tear the fabric off that particular roll. So it really depends on your purpose of the belt and what species you're planting. But if you have a species that is really known to sucker and do a lot of suckering, fabric can really hinder that particular species. So, and as we all know, the fabric is not breaking down as near as fast as they thought it was going to. So, all right. So back to my hackberry honey locust. So I put those in the row together and I put them at 18 feet. My bur oak, I put that one at 18 feet as well, based off the soils. So this Quake and Aspen, that's a species we haven't took a look at yet. So a little bit different diversity in this belt. This is an 8-row belt versus a 7-row belt like I have up here, and that's fine. This is on the north side, so wind blows from the north pretty hard in the wintertime in northern Kingsbury County. All right, so we got Quake and Aspen. So let's take a look at that particular species. Quake and Aspen. Aspen is one of those that they're going to grow pretty quick. Maturity height, 50 feet, 20 to 25 feet. So it's going to be more on the tall side. So let's look at my design. I got my 8-row belt here, tall. I'm talking about row 5 and 6. So I'm going to come down here, look at my tall, 12 to 18 feet. So go back to my design. Row 5, 18 feet. Got it in there. So now I'm gonna do a ponderosa pine. So what's my design say about ponderosa pine? I got an 8-row belt. Let's go up here, and I'm on row 6, I believe, right? So there's my 8-row, row 6. So I'm within my spec to hit that pine. So if I wanted to put the pine in row 5 where that aspen was, this chart, the recommendation would not be to do that. And that's just the way the spacing, the way everything works out, the way that the trees could get crushed with snow and all that. And that's why this is recommended to do it on row 1, 6, 7, or 8 for a pine. Okay, so now I'm gonna come down here. Pine has its own category, 12 to 16 feet on the interior rows. So let's go back and look at my deal and see how I did. On pine, 16 foot, max that out, row 6. Black Hill spruce, so kind of the same thought process as the pine. Go back to my design. Let's see here, spruce right here, 12 to 20 interior, so there's that. Let's go up to my 8-row spruce, there's 7. I'm in row 7, so I'm within my spec. And then I think I finished it up with a shrub. Yep, I went back to my choke cherry. So as I'm sitting in my house and as I look out, I see that choke cherry row on both sides of these belts. So I went 6 foot in row spacing on that. I didn't put tubes on the choke cherry because it's more of a shrub or the coniferous ones. I did on my aspen, my bur oak, hackberry. I could do tubes here. I want cedar. I would not do tubes, and lilac. I'm not going to do tubes. All right. So there's my design. And that's how you would do this. This is site 2, then this is site 3. One's 8 rows and one's 7 rows, so we got enough to protect that farm site. Any questions on that? Okay, this is a kind of a handy tab here because this is going to pull all the information over that we just put into that tree site, and you'd be able to put your local however you do your billing, and this would give the producer a estimate of tree tubes. You can put the cost for those in there, the fabric, your linear feet, how much you get to plant trees and shrubs. So there's different types of things here. It gives you your total numbers. So just kind of a nice estimate. So this estimate here is right around $14,698 to do this, to do all these trees that feel windbreak and that farm set windbreak. So kind of a nice thing to have there.
And to get those prices, Ryan, you have to go into the prices and change to your own prices.
Right. Yep. Okay. Is there anything else in this workbook? Go through my notes here. We talked about the 37, we talked about the 20-year height. Talked about the functions of this. I think we're good. Let's go back to that field windbreak that we did. And real quick here. So I'm going to clear my area of interest here because this is the okay. So say we wanted to do a field windbreak in a series with each other. I just want to cover this real quick. So if you remember when we first started this training, we did our field windbreak right along this road here, right? So say he wants to do something in a series. So if we did something like this, and he wants another belt like this, and one down here, or maybe he wants like we did here, and he wants another one spaced out here. Well, how far should you put that out? How far should the wind and the height of the trees and all that, should that come into play? And how we figure that out is through this document right here, which is the L factor table. Okay. And I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here and go. So you can see this. This is the soil interpretive groups. And every single county, and we're in Kingsbury County, and this is all in the Field Office Tech Guide under section, I'd have to go look, but it's in the Field Office Tech Guide. It's underneath the soils part. And what this tells you is we're working in this Clarina vanilla soil, but here's our T, our 5, and we're going to want to know this number here, this 48. And here's our tree group right here. And here's our MLRA, 55C is where that's at. So back to this thing. So how we would do this, we'd find Kingsbury County. That's there it is. It's got an I factor of 48 off of that table. And we got a tons per acre of 5. So we'd go here, we just would follow this down. So what this table is telling me, 425 feet is how far you'd want to set those tree belts apart. So if I go back to here, so I'd want to be 425 feet. So if I got my measuring tool, there's 700 some feet. So about half of that. So my first belt would be here, and my second belt would be here. So I could set those belts apart, okay? So then if you think about our 20-year height, on our table, you'd find your 20-year height, and we got something called 10H and 15H. So you take your 20-year height. So what that's saying is how tall the tree is in 20 years or at maturity, you take that times 10, and that will protect that far out. So if you got a 20-year height and you're at 20 feet, that tree is going to protect 200 feet out in 20 years. So that's how you would tell that, to try to make these in a series and that type of thing. So that's just kind of a quick guide for determining them in a series. So that's another table. That's that table. Okay, any questions on that? All right.
Sorry, Ryan, I had a mute. Where do you get the table from?
What's that?
Where do you get the table from? Can you show that again?
This table here?
Yeah.
I can send that out. It's on our SharePoint site. I don't think our actual tree form has this table on there, Tanya.
Okay.
But your table 1, this one here, that's in the Field Office Tech Guide. And I'll show you where that's at. Field Office Tech Guide. It'd be underneath section statewide soils information. Oopsie. I always have a tough time finding this table one in here. If all else fails, you can go to document search and type table 1 in here. And the bad part about this, they lumped every county together. So this document's like 700 some pages long. So you'd want to find where your county's at. Then in your print feature, you would say print page 424 to 450 or something like that. So you're not printing out the entire thing. But this is a really handy guide to have, because this will tell you your tree shrub site group for all the soils in the county that you're working in, your T factor, and kind of all the characteristics of that soil.
Ryan, why was there such a difference when you were looking at that from Kingsbury County and so I looked over to the left a little bit, but for Hamlin County, and I think it was using the same numbers, it was 725 feet. Is that just the difference in the soils?
It's the difference. So you're talking about this table here.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at Kingsbury and Hamlin County, where is Hamlin County?
Right to the left.
So Hamlin County, the soils are a little bit, I'd almost call them heavier, I guess would be kind of the word for it, where these factors come into play, the way the wind goes across the land. And that's why, like if you had an IF 48 in Hamlin County and you had a TF 5, you'd be at 700 feet.
Okay.
So there is a difference, and that's why you would find that they call them C factors, and that's what these numbers are here. The K factor, 30, 25, 20. Like in Union County, take that same example, 48, an IF 48 out that table, and Union County way down in the southeastern part of the state, 1,150 feet. So it makes a difference where you're at.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're going to talk about job approval authority. Talk about job approval authority here. The job approval authority, that's what our skills matrix looks like for the ecological science stuff here. I'm going to open this up here. So you can see this a little bit better. So all of our specifications are in here. We're going to go down to Windbreak. So that's the one we're working on today. And these they're not alphabetically, they're done numerically. So I got to go backwards. 380. The way this is set up, it's got the practice up here. It's got the lead discipline, which is ecological sciences. The complexity is the controlling factor. The unit is the type. So there's 5 job classes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this would be, you could do them for all types except a feedlot, a living snow fence, and that type of thing, because you remember the different types of designs inside that Woodland Techno 42. Class 2 would be all of them except living snow fences, and then 3 through 5 would be all. So any type of design that you could do. And remember, with job approval authority, you can always design something. It's just that you can't certify off on it. Back in, so if we went through with this tree planting, let's see here. right here, and we filled in our applied amount and our links and all this stuff over here. And then in our front page, we can come down here, because so you can always put your name here for planning, as long as you have someone with the job approval authority that approves your plan for you. But then you'd be able, if you have the job approval authority, like a class 4 or 5, you'd be able to say it meets South Dakota standards and specs, then sign off on it in here. So that's where that comes into play, because all of our conservation practices need some type of job approval authority to plan and apply them. Does that make sense? And you as a partner, you can have job approval authority. Let's go back to my PowerPoint here. And this is the new draft policy. I mean, this is really, really new because I just reviewed this last week. And I'm assuming within the next two to 3 months, this will actually become our policy. So how would you get job approval authority to do trees or fabric or whatever practices that you're doing? So you'd work with your local DC, and you would request the job approval authority from. So they would go to their RUC or their resource unit conservationist and request it through them. So the DC would look at the partner's work, and the DC would recommend the ability of the partner to the RUC. And then the RUC, the resource unit conservationist, would review it and then approve the job approval authority for the partner. And then the assistant for field operations, so like Michelle Burke over here on the eastern side of the state, or the state resource conservationist, which would be Justin Halsky, they would concur, because there's an approval, then someone has to review it, like a concur, and then that partner would have that job approval authority. So then you'd have this filled out, and which one you would be, you'd circle that, and that type of thing. So then you'd have the job approval authority to actually plan and apply this practice. So if at the end of the day, if you've been doing a lot of tree plans and you got a good working relationship and you understand the practice, and you don't want to have the district conservationists always have to review the work and sign off on the work, and this would help them be able to do their job more efficiently, that's how you'd get that job approval for it.
So do you have to get a job approval report for each plan that you do, or is that like for the whole season?
Nope. So what I would do is, as you become comfortable writing tree plans and you're going through that process that we just did, understanding the design, understanding the purpose, understanding the standard, it's, do you understand the application of the practice? So after you do a bunch of them, because you might do like 10 field windbreaks in a growing season, and then you might do like 3 farmstead windbreaks, and maybe you only do like 1 living snow fence every other year. So maybe you could get job approval authority for the field windbreaks in the farmstead windbreaks, because you do a lot of those, you understand them, you understand how to plan them. But the snow fence, you don't do that very often, so you got to do a few more of those designs and have someone review that design, and then set it up for the job approval. So basically, it's how comfortable are you within the standard? How comfortable are you designing these things? And how comfortable is the district conservationist and you working together to give you that job approval authority? So that's how it works. So it's typically going to take a couple of growing seasons to get some job approval authority, a year or two before you really start understanding how to put these designs together and be comfortable with it, right? So just because you write one tree plan doesn't mean you're going to be granted job approval authority. So it's just with experience with the conservation practice. And that goes for grass seedings as well. You could get job approval authority for grass seedings and mulching. Mulching would be the fabric, putting down the fabric. So cover crops, some conservation districts have drills, and they hire out the drill and do, they'll make a cover crop seeding for the producer. You could get job approval authority to do a cover crop. So that's what this entire list is, with all our practices.
So what's the difference? You have to have approval to do these now? Was it before that district managers were putting these together without approval, or what was going on?
No, they were putting them together, which is always good, and that's great that you were planning them. So doing what we did, but someone from NRCS, typically had been the district conservationist, has the job approval authority. They reviewed your plan and signed off on the work. So you were basically covered underneath them. What I'm saying with this job approval authority, if you're really sufficient at it and you feel comfortable with it, the district conservationist feels comfortable with it, you could completely bypass them and just do these tree plans on your own, and you would not have to have them look at it if you didn't want to. That's the nice thing about job approval authority. So,
okay.
And it just makes us way more efficient, right? I mean, that's why the soil con technicians, it's so important for them to get job approval authority in a lot of these conservation practices, so the DC doesn't have to review all their work all the time, sign off on all their work. It's an efficiency thing, Tanya. So same thing with the conservation district. You guys are doing a lot of this work. It'd be really good for you to get the job approval authority. So it speeds up the efficiency of the office. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions in the chat?
Not right now.
Okay. Okay, any other final thoughts? That's kind of where I wanted to end it today. Is there any other questions? We've been on it for about 2 hours. That's about as much of a Teams meeting as that I can handle.
It
I
was
just
a
want to
good-
make, I just
good
want to make
2
the
hours.
statement.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to make the statement, had I been given this information day one when I started the job, it would have been so much easier.
Okay.
This information was not even presented to me, and I've been at it like 2.5 years.
Okay. Well, I'm glad it was helpful.
Yeah, I researched it and did it on my own, but this should be offered to every new conservation district employee in my mind.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, and I don't have and I came out and worked with people one-on-one. Pre-COVID, and sit down and go through an actual real plan with a newer conservation district employee. I don't have any issues doing that, because I mean, a person, you could literally spend an entire day just on one or two of those tech notes. You really could do that. There's just so much information in there. And that's why it's important to kind of read through that and try to understand it, and then just ask some questions.
I guess,
This has-
when I first started, my DC helped me a little bit, showed me like one tech guide thing. After that, he kind of left me alone. So what I did do is go through my old files and found some CRP plantings, and I kind of let those let me guide myself. I'd look up a specific wildlife planting, and I'm like, okay, I need one for 5 rows. Look up an old one and see what it looked like. So that was a lot how I learned in this office, because I didn't have this either.
Yeah, and everyone learns different. I mean, it's just, some people can sit down and read a tech note and they completely understand it, right? With me, the way I learn, I have to kind of go through it several different times, go out in the field and try to apply that. And yeah, I don't learn the best just by reading something. I have to do it. I gotta almost do it. Sitting watching someone do it, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either. I have to physically do it for me to learn. We're all different learning speeds and all that stuff. So
I think this would be great for all the district employees to be able to watch this or be involved in this. I think this was fantastic.
yep. Well, thank you. Any, Michael or Kristen, do they have any questions? I guess I can look at the chat now.
You can look at the chat.
So appreciate the information. Okay. You're not asking too many questions, Kristen. Michael, are you good? Did you learn anything?
Oh yeah, I learned a lot. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, good. So out west, you would have the person that's that has my job out there is Corey Bossert. So he would be based out of the Rapid City office. So
Okay.
and Pierre would be Kelly Stout would be out in the Pierre area. So
Our county is a little unique too in that we don't have an NRCS field office.
right,
So residents
right,
have to go to Fall River or Pennington.
right. Yep. Well, any other final thoughts or questions? Okay. So I'm gonna end the recording now, and then I will send that out to Tanya, and then you can do what you want to do with that, Tanya. So.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, Ryan.
Yep.
We appreciate it.
Thanks
Yep,
for taking the time to do this.
Yep,
Yeah, thank you.
not a problem. Well, everyone have a good day. Try to stay warm.
Stay warm.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Take care.